Hi, my name's Dave Annell. I'm a professional genealogist based in England and a former principal family history specialist at the UK's National Archives. I've been researching my own family history for over 40 years and I haven't finished yet. The major commercial genealogical websites are designed to make your research journey as smooth as possible. Every search you carried out is accompanied by hints and suggestions pointing you towards other potentially relevant records. This all sounds like a great idea, and it often is, but there's a danger that the inexperienced researcher will accept hints without question and end up with someone else's ancestors on their tree. In this short talk, I'll attempt to explain the importance of carrying out thorough, evidence-based research while keeping the hints and suggestions at arm's length. Digitisation has fundamentally changed the way that we carry out our family history research, giving us access to some of the most important genealogical sources worldwide 24 hours a day from the comfort of our own homes. And we're encouraged to share the results of our research, adding the names, dates and other details of our ancestors to online family trees, all linked to digital images of the original documents. Sounds great, doesn't it? The way that the big commercial websites present it to us, it really couldn't be easier. You just type in your name and out come your ancestors. But there's a problem. You see, family history research isn't easy. The records that we use weren't designed with us in mind, so as family historians, we have to learn to tease the information out of them. We need to get to know what the records are telling us, and we need to familiarise ourselves with other records that might tell us more about our ancestors. The records don't provide the links themselves, or at least they rarely do. I'm focusing here on research in England and Wales, and the key records, birth, marriage and death certificates, census returns and parish registers, contain very little in the way of direct linkage. Unlike in other parts of the world, there's no explicit link between the record of someone's birth and that of their marriage or death. As researchers, we have to make those links ourselves, and that's rarely an easy task. And my fear is that by providing researchers with hints and suggestions generated by complex algorithms, the commercial websites are just as likely to point people in the wrong direction as they are to suggest the right answers. I want to illustrate the potential problems by sharing a few worked examples. I want to start with a case that I worked on earlier this year involving a woman called Eliza Mitchell. Eliza Mitchell married John Graham at the parish church of St Mark Old Street on 21st September 1857. The entry in the parish register tells us that Eliza was of full age, i.e. that she was 21 or over, that she hadn't been married before, she was a spinster, and that her father was called Robert Mitchell and that he was an upholsterer. Later census returns don't particularly help as far as Eliza's origins are concerned, giving a variety of birthplaces: Surrey, Southwark, Middlesex, London, St George's in the East London, London St Luke's and London Borough. But the age is fairly consistent and it all points towards a birth sometime around 1835. If we turn to the Ancestry website and use the 1857 marriage as our starting point, this is the 1857 marriage of Eliza to John Graham, we'll see that there are a number of suggested records down the right-hand side here. I want to draw your attention to the entry near the foot of the list, which turns out to be the only suggested baptismal record for Eliza on the list. The other baptismal records here relate to possible children of Eliza. So this is the one that's of interest here. But it actually says Elizabeth Mitchell. And if we view that particular image or that document, we'll see that this is an Elizabeth Mitchell who was baptised on the 11th of January 1835 at the parish church of St Leonard's, Shoreditch in London. But the father is Joseph Mitchell and the mother Eliza Mitchell. We'll view the actual image here. So there we have it, Elizabeth, 11th January 1835, daughter of Joseph and Eliza Mitchell of Curtain Road, and father Joseph was a cabinet maker. We also get a date of birth there, the 9th of March 1834. Now, as an inexperienced researcher, it would be entirely possible to accept this suggestion, and ignoring the fact that Eliza stated that her father was Robert when she got married, and that this is the baptism of an Elizabeth, not an Eliza Mitchell, you could adopt this family as yours and add them to your tree. And this is evidently what at least one person has done, because on this ancestry family tree here, we'll see that the baptism there's the marriage in 1857 to John Graham, and they've assigned this person to the baptism on the 11th of January 1835. Now, what we need to understand is that the suggestion is merely a suggestion. It's not evidence. We should by all means consider it, but in this case we can quickly reject it. This Elizabeth Mitchell married in Hackney in 1856. And there we have her marriage. Elizabeth Mitchell of full age, a spinster of Mare Street in Hackney, and the father, Joseph Mitchell, a cabinet maker. We can be quite confident that this is the Elizabeth who was baptised at Shoreditch in 1835, and therefore that it's not our Eliza. And this process of investigation and elimination is an important one. I like to think of it in terms of chickens and eggs. Our ancestor, the person whose birth record we're trying to find, is our chicken, and what we're trying to do is to find the egg from which he or she hatched. The first step is to identify some potential eggs, records of birth or baptism of people with the right name in the right area at the right sort of time. Then, as all serious family historians should, it's our job to look at each egg and see if we can eliminate it from our inquiries. Let's have a look at how this works in practice. Anne Emery married Henry Underwood at the parish church of St Nicholas, Brighton, in the southern English county of Sussex on 27th of May 1833. Now, pre-1837 marriage records in England are notoriously low on genealogical content, and here all we learn about Anne is that she was a spinster at the time of her marriage and that she was unable to sign her name. You can see that she made her mark. Neither of the witnesses appears to have any family connection to the bride or groom. Henry and Anne had a son, Henry Jr., baptised in Brighton in December 1835, but Anne was to die just over 2 years later. She was buried at St Nicholas, Brighton on 3rd of January 1838. Again, the death and burial records don't tell us a great deal about her, but we do learn that she was 26 when she died, which means that she'd been about 21 or 22 when she got married, which is a very reasonable sort of age to expect a woman to be marrying at that time. Now, when we're searching for a birth in the era before civil registration, we ideally want to go into the search armed with as many as possible of the following details: the age, which gives us the approximate date of birth, a birthplace of some sort, and ideally the father's name. But here we have just one of those, Anne's age. The name Emery, though, is relatively common in the area around Brighton, so it would be reasonable to assume in the first place that Anne was born somewhere not too far away, and a search for possible baptisms in Sussex reveals 3 candidates. Now, this is on the Ancestry website as a result of a search for Anne Emery, born about 1812 in Sussex, England. And in fact, there are 7 results, but we can, once we eliminate the duplicates, we can see that there are in fact 3 baptisms. There's one on the 25th of July 1813 in Staining, and this one is the daughter of Robert and Mary. There's one on the 13th of December 1812 in Westbourne, and that Anne is the daughter of Frank and Sarah. And on the 4th of February 1812, there's a baptism of an Anne in Seaford, and she is the daughter of James and Anne. Now, I would certainly want to look at some maps here, and if I did, I would quickly discover that Staining and Seaford are both quite close to Brighton, whereas Westbourne is some distance away in the west of Sussex, right next to the Hampshire border. Nevertheless, though, I would want to look at each of these in turn to see whether they could possibly be our Anne. Well, if we did that, we would quickly be able to eliminate the Westbourne baptism, because that Anne married a man called William Bowles in the parish of Funtington, which is right next to Westbourne, in January 1840. Note the father's name there, Frank Emery, he's a gardener, and that ties in exactly with the baptism of Anne that we found at Westbourne. So we can eliminate that particular person. The girl who was baptised at Staining in 1813 can also be eliminated, but this one's a little bit more complicated. She's probably the 28-year-old Anne Emery living in Brighton in 1841 and working there as a servant. but she died back in Steyning, unmarried, in December 1848, aged 35. The informant, although it's not stated on the death certificate, is almost certainly her mother. So that's 2 of the 3 eliminated, and it just leaves the Seaford baptism. And it would be tempting to accept this as the right one and move on. But I'm afraid that we can also reject this Anne. We can view the Seaford parish registers online on the FamilySearch website. And if we did that and looked at this page for the baptism, we'd see right down the bottom of the page here, we have the baptism on February the 4th, 1812 of Anne, daughter of James and Anne Emery. But if we look a little bit further and go on to the opposite page where there's a list of burials, we'll see the burial on the 22nd of February 1812 of Anne, the infant daughter of James and Anne Emery. So that Anne sadly only lived for a few weeks and was buried in February 1812, so she can scarcely be the person who married in 1833. So we can eliminate the Seaford Anne from our inquiries. We've emptied our basket of eggs, and we need to start thinking of other solutions. It's possible that Anne was born outside Sussex, but we also need to bear in mind that not everything is available to us online. It's possible that she was baptised in a Sussex parish whose registers either have not been digitised and indexed, or perhaps the registers have been completely lost or damaged. And we can't ignore the possibility that Anne was never baptised. We sometimes fixate too much on looking for a record of birth which might not actually exist. I just want to show you another example of the danger of blindly accepting hints and suggestions. Thomas Bennet, the Lord of the Manor of Little Warley in Essex, appears in no fewer than 81 family trees on Ancestry, and the vast majority of them give his year of death as 1703. It's clear that these trees have been copied and recopied without any attempt to carry out any proper research. But it isn't too hard to find this document. This is the apprenticeship indenture of Thomas's son, John. The document is dated 7th of December 1685, and Thomas is described as late of Little Warley in the county of Essex, gent, deceased. The Thomas Bennet who died in 1703 is a different man. It's not an uncommon name. Our Thomas was clearly dead by 1685. And the reason that no record of his burial has been found is probably because no record of it exists. There's a gap in the Little Warley parish registers between 1665 and 1671, during which time Thomas presumably died. Here's a note in the parish register saying the reason why so many years' burials were not registered was because the parish officers would undertake the keeping of the register books themselves and not allow me the keeping of it, living out of the parish. So the vicar's saying that he was living outside the parish so that the clerks wanted to keep the parish registers in the parish and therefore wouldn't allow him to keep the registers, but it seems that they didn't keep them at all. It's likely that the manorial court registers in this case would prove or confirm that indeed Thomas did die at around that time. So we need to be wary of the hints and suggestions offered to us by the commercial websites. By all means look at them and ask yourself, could this be the right person? Could this be the person I'm looking for? Think about the geography. Most people were born, lived and died within a relatively small area. So your Lancashire agricultural labourer probably didn't get married in Sussex, and he probably didn't die in Cornwall. Don't focus on the name. Think about other aspects of their lives, their social class, their occupations, things like that. Before you add an ancestor to your tree, before you adopt someone as your own, ask yourself the question, am I really sure that this is the right person? Thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been useful.